When the world goes quiet, some voices still remain. Not every soul finds peace when the clock strikes 12. There are stories hidden in the shadows, whispers drifting between the living and the forgotten. Some stories linger, some souls don't leave. Welcome to Stillness After Midnight, where every silence tells a story. If you're drawn to the mysteries that stir after dark, the voices that echo when the world sleeps, subscribe now and join us as we listen to the souls who still have something to say, because in the stillness, the truth finally speaks. I remember the first time I saw that book. It wasn't in a dusty library, nor on the shelf of an antique store. It came to me the way forbidden things often do, quietly, as if it had been waiting for me all along. I had been traveling in Thailand for nearly 3 weeks. My name is Daniel, 32 years old, a freelance writer. Some people write about politics, others about food. I write about shadows, folklore, superstitions, the kind of stories that most people dismiss as nonsense until the night grows too silent. For years, I had been chasing legends across Asia, hoping to find one that was more than a story. Something real, something that would prove to me, and maybe to my readers, that the line between myth and truth is thinner than we think. Bangkok had been overwhelming. Too many lights, too much noise. I moved north, into the smaller towns where the neon faded into the glow of oil lamps, and the streets carried whispers older than the skyscrapers. It was in a riverside village that I met him, an old man whose name I never truly caught. He sat beneath the shade of a tamarind tree, selling charms carved from bone and small talismans strung with red thread. I didn't expect him to notice me, but he did. His eyes followed me as if he had been waiting, and when I drew closer, he reached under the wooden table, pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle, and placed it before me without a word. I asked what it was. He didn't answer, just tapped the bundle with his yellowed fingernail, then touched 2 fingers to his lips, as if to warn me against speaking. When I unwrapped the cloth later that night in my rented room, I felt the air shift, colder, heavier. Inside was a book, bound in dark leather that felt too warm to the touch. Its cover bore no title, no symbol, nothing but scratches that might once have been letters. I should have put it away. I should have walked back to the river and returned it to the man. But instead I opened it. The pages smelled faintly of smoke and earth. The writing inside was not in English but Thai. Lines of script that curled like serpents. I couldn't read it, not fully, but here and there were drawings, circles, candles, strange figures kneeling before an altar, a shadow drawn with no face. And then, tucked between the pages, a smaller slip of parchment written in English. The handwriting was shaky, uneven. To call the one who answers, light 12 candles. Place them in a circle. Sit inside and speak the words. Do not break the circle. Do not leave before the last flame dies. My hands trembled as I read it again and again. It felt absurd, like a prank meant for gullible tourists. Yet there was something about the book, about the way the letters seemed to move when I stared too long, that made me believe it was not meant to be seen by chance. I told myself I would not do it. I was a collector of stories, not a fool willing to gamble with the unseen. But the thought lingered, gnawing at the edge of my mind. I found myself picturing it late at night. The flicker of candles, the silence of a graveyard, the whisper of something waiting in the dark. It was a week later that I mentioned it to the group. I had met them at a hostel in Chiang Mai. 3 travelers like me, restless, curious, half in love with danger. There was Marcus, a German student of anthropology with a laugh too loud for temples. Claire, a photographer from France whose eyes always searched for the broken and the strange. And Aaron, a Thai American whose grandparents had once been monks. We had spent days together, wandering ruins and night markets, drinking cheap beer while swapping ghost stories. One night under the dim yellow light of the hostel courtyard, I told them about the book. Marcus leaned forward immediately, his grin sharp. A summoning ritual in a cemetery? We have to try it. Claire smirked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You believe in this nonsense? She asked, though her voice carried more intrigue than doubt. Aaron was quiet at first. His gaze was distant, fixed on the flickering candle at our table. When he finally spoke, his tone was heavier than the night air. This is not just a story, he said. There are old things here. Things you should not call. But the way he said it only deepened the pull. If even he believed, then surely there was something to be found. I remember the silence that followed, the four of us staring at one another, feeling the weight of the idea settle between us. It was Marcus who broke it. Let's do it, he said, raising his glass like a toast. What's the worst that could happen? The worst. I didn't answer that night. I just smiled faintly and took another sip. But when I returned to my room, I found myself opening the book again, tracing the drawings with my fingertips. Something in me had already decided. The following days blurred together. We prepared quietly, as if ashamed to speak of it too loudly. Marcus bought candles from a roadside vendor, tall white ones that dripped wax like pale blood. Claire gathered incense, saying the smoke would look beautiful in her photographs. Aaron brought chalk to draw the circle, though he warned us again and again that this was not a game. As for me, I carried the book, wrapped always in its cloth, hidden beneath my bag. It seemed to hum faintly at times, as though aware of what we planned. I don't know why I agreed. Perhaps it was pride, the desire to prove myself to the others. Perhaps it was the hunger of a writer desperate for something more than recycled myths. Or perhaps it was the book itself, whispering softly, luring me toward the inevitable. Whatever the reason, by the end of that week, we were standing at the gates of an old cemetery by the river. It was nearly midnight. The air smelled of damp earth and the faint sweetness of frangipani blossoms. The moon hung low, swollen and pale. The caretaker had long since gone home, and the gates stood open as if waiting for us. I carried the book pressed against my chest, and though my heart should have raced, it beat with a strange calm. As if I had been here before, as if the story had already been written, and I was simply walking into it. That was how it began, with a book that should never have been mine, with a choice I told myself was harmless, with the whisper of shadows that seemed too eager to be called. Even now, as I tell you this, I can still feel the leather of that book beneath my fingertips, warm, alive. And I wonder, if I had left it beneath that tamarind tree, would the shadows still have found me, or had they chosen me long before? The cemetery lay beyond the edge of the village, where the houses thinned out and the road dissolved into dirt. It was not the kind of place you would notice if you were only passing through. Hidden behind tangled bamboo and the drooping branches of tamarind trees, it seemed to fold itself into the earth, as though the living wished to forget its presence. We arrived there close to midnight. The four of us moved quietly, our footsteps muffled by the damp soil. The river ran not far away, its surface black and still, carrying the faint odor of mud and decay. I had read once that water near a graveyard carries whispers. Standing there, I almost believed it. The air grew heavier as we walked past the gate. It was a simple iron arch, rusting, one hinge broken so that the gate leaned at a strange angle. No lock barred our way. As I passed under, I felt a shiver trace my spine, the way one might feel when crossing a threshold into someone else's home uninvited. Marcus, ever the loud one, broke the silence. This is perfect, he whispered, though his voice carried far too easily. Can you feel it? It's like the air itself is waiting. Claire raised her camera, the lens reflecting the faint moonlight. The shutter clicked softly. She was always chasing the poetry of ruins, the beauty of broken places. I wondered if she would find beauty here, or only shadows. Arun walked slower than the rest. His eyes darted left and right, scanning the crooked rows of tombstones. Some were marked with Thai script, carved deep into stone that had cracked with time. Others leaned heavily, half buried in weeds. Incense sticks, long extinguished, lay scattered in front of a few graves, their tips blackened like tiny burnt fingers. People here still come to make offerings, Aaron murmured. They believe the spirits linger. Hungry spirits. If we disturb them, spirits, rituals, curses. Marcus laughed softly, though it sounded more like bravado than joy. We'll have a story to tell, and Daniel will finally have something real for his writing. I didn't reply. Perhaps I should have. But the truth is, I wanted it as much as he did. We moved deeper into the graveyard, guided by a narrow path of cracked stone slabs. The trees pressed close, their branches swaying though the air was still. A lantern swung gently from a wooden post near the center, unlit, as if even light dared not linger. And then came the sound. At first it was faint, like the creak of wood in the wind. But as we stopped, listening, it grew clearer, sharp, deliberate. Clop, clop, clop. The unmistakable echo of wooden sandals striking stone. We froze. No one spoke. The sound came from somewhere beyond the rows of graves, steady, unhurried, as if someone was walking through the cemetery at this hour, utterly at ease. Claire's fingers tightened on her camera. Marcus grinned nervously, eyes searching the darkness. Arun's face turned pale beneath the moonlight. It's just someone passing, Marcus muttered. But even he didn't sound convinced. The footsteps slowed, then stopped altogether. The silence that followed was suffocating, louder than any sound could have been. My heart beat so heavily I thought it would echo off the stones. Finally, Aaron whispered, "We shouldn't be here." But none of us moved. Perhaps we were too afraid to retreat, or perhaps too stubborn to give in to fear. Instead, we pressed forward, each step dragging us closer to the heart of the cemetery. At the center was a small clearing where the trees parted and the moonlight fell pale and sharp. This was where we decided to perform the ritual. The ground was flat, a circle of earth free of graves, as if cleared for some forgotten purpose. Marcus unpacked the candles, 12 tall sticks of wax. Claire arranged them carefully in a circle, while Arun used chalk to draw symbols between each one, copying the sketches from the book. I watched the lines take shape, white against the dark soil, curves and spirals, strange marks that felt alive even as they settled into the dirt. The book itself lay in my hands. Its leather cover pulsed faintly with warmth, like skin. When I opened it, the drawings seemed clearer than before, as though the night itself sharpened them. The slip of parchment with English words fluttered in the breeze, though there was no wind. Do not break the circle. Do not leave before the last flame dies. I read it silently, the warning echoing in my chest. When all was ready, we lit the candles one by one. The flames flickered weakly, casting long, trembling shadows across the clearing. The air smelled of wax and smoke, thick and cloying. The world outside the circle dimmed, swallowed by the night. Marcus was the first to sit inside. He plopped down cross-legged with a grin, as if daring the darkness to answer. Claire followed, setting her camera beside her. Aaron sat reluctantly, his movements slow, careful. And finally I stepped into the circle, clutching the book, feeling the weight of every eye, seen and unseen, watching. The moment I crossed the chalk line, the air changed. It pressed against my skin, heavy, damp, charged like the air before a storm. I felt it in my lungs, each breath harder to draw. I opened the book to the page marked with the ritual. The Thai words curled like smoke across the parchment. I could not pronounce them, not truly, but Arun leaned closer, his voice low as he translated. Call not with anger, call not with laughter. Call only with silence in the heart, for silence is the language they hear. We fell quiet. Even Marcus stopped smiling. The candles hissed faintly as their flames bent in one direction, though no wind blew. The shadows lengthened, merging until the circle itself seemed like a single pool of darkness pierced by trembling light. And then, another sound. Clop. Clop. The footsteps again. Louder this time, closer. I swallowed hard. my mouth dry. The others looked to me, as if I held the choice. Perhaps I did. With trembling fingers, I placed my hand on the open page, feeling the heat of the words through the paper. The night leaned closer, the silence deepened, and somewhere beyond the circle of candles, something waited. That was the first time I realized the graveyard was not empty. It was never empty. The 12 flames trembled as though something unseen had brushed past them. The circle was complete, each candle a fragile sentinel warding off the dark. We sat inside like children daring each other to breathe too loudly, the chalk markings faintly glowing in the candlelight, pale as bone. I had expected the night to feel ordinary once the ritual began, as if nothing more than a foolish game. Instead, the graveyard held its breath. The river, the trees, even the insects, all stilled. It was as if the world outside our circle had been wrapped in glass. Claire broke the silence first, her voice a hushed whisper. "Are you recording this?" she asked Marcus. He lifted his phone, its screen faintly glowing. "Of course," he said, though the bravado in his tone was thinner than before. The red recording dot blinked like a restless eye. Aaron frowned. "Put it away," he muttered. "This is not a show. If you make fun of it, it will not forgive you." Marcus chuckled, but the sound cracked halfway through. He set the phone aside reluctantly. I opened the book, its pages fluttering, though the air was dead still. The writing coiled across the parchment, almost shifting, as though the words disliked being looked at. My finger traced the English slip again. "Do not break the circle. Do not leave before the last flame dies." The letters seemed darker now, the ink fresh, as if written only moments ago. "Read," Claire urged softly, her camera resting in her lap. "Let's just see what happens." I hesitated. My throat was dry, each breath shallow. A part of me wanted to close the book, to blow out the candles, to laugh it off as a travel story gone too far. But curiosity is a poison that tastes like truth, and I drank it willingly. I began to speak. The Thai words tumbled clumsily from my mouth, heavy, thick on my tongue. I could not pronounce them well, but Arun sat beside me, whispering the correct syllables, guiding my voice like a teacher correcting a child. Together our voices wove into the night, uneven but steady. At first nothing happened. The candles burned, the shadows swayed, and my own voice sounded foolish to my ears. But then a change. The air thickened. My chest ached with each inhale, as if the oxygen itself had turned heavy. The ground beneath us vibrated faintly, subtle but undeniable, like a heartbeat buried deep in the soil. Claire leaned forward, her eyes wide, the reflection of the flames dancing in them. "Do you feel that?" she whispered. Marcus nodded, his grin now gone. He licked his lips nervously, eyes darting at the darkness beyond the circle. We continued the chant. The words grew louder, heavier, no longer mine alone. It was as though another voice had joined us, low and rasping, hidden beneath ours. For every syllable we spoke, an echo answered. Trailing behind, a sound not from any throat I could see. Aaron's face had gone pale. He looked at me with eyes sharp, urgent. "Don't stop," he mouthed silently. So I didn't. The candles flared higher, wax dripping faster, pooling into pale rivers that crept toward the chalk lines. The flames bent inward, not outward, as though drawn toward the center of the circle where nothing yet sat. And then, the footsteps. Clop, clop, clop. They circled us slowly, pacing just beyond the ring of light. Each step deliberate, echoing too clearly against soil and stone. I dared not turn my head, but I felt it. The presence moving around us, inspecting, measuring. Claire raised her camera with trembling hands. The lens clicked once, twice, but when she lowered it to glance at the screen, her face drained of color. "There's nothing," she whispered. "Just black. The lens won't see the candles, won't see us. It's like we aren't even here." Her words carved silence into the group. The chanting faltered for a second, and in that pause I heard it, breathing, slow, ragged, deep, right behind me. I forced the chant back to life, my voice cracking, rushing to fill the void. Arun joined louder, pressing each syllable with urgency. The others followed, though Marcus's voice shook with fear. The presence lingered, pacing, breathing, never crossing the chalk. The flames shivered violently whenever it drew close, bending toward the edge, as if wanting to leap out of their wax prisons. Then something unexpected. The 12th candle, the one directly across from me, sputtered. Its flame danced erratically, shrinking, stretching. A hiss rose as wax poured down its side, and then with a soft sigh, the light died. Darkness filled that gap. The circle was broken. Marcus cursed under his breath, leaping forward as if to relight it. But Arun grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "No!" he hissed. "You must not touch it now." "But the circle, it is not for us to repair once it chooses." Aaron snapped, his voice shaking. "We must endure." We sat frozen, the broken gap yawning like an open wound. The presence outside stilled. No footsteps, no breath. Only silence so deep it rang in my ears. And then gently, something lowered itself into the center of the circle. The soil did not shift. The waxed rivers did not ripple. But we knew it was there. The air bent inward, heavy and dense, as though the world itself bowed to an unseen weight. Claire's camera fell from her hands. Marcus swore again, softer this time, his voice breaking. Arun lowered his gaze, lips moving in silent prayer. I stared at the empty center, every nerve screaming, every instinct demanding I run. But I couldn't. My body would not obey. It sat there, unseen, silent, waiting. The last words of the parchment burned in my mind. "Do not leave before the last flame dies." And around us, 11 candles still burned. The night had changed. It was no longer ours. We had called, and something had answered. It is strange how time bends when fear takes hold. Minutes feel like hours. Breaths stretch into eternity. We sat in that circle, 11 flames burning, each of us too afraid to speak above a whisper, waiting for the inevitable. The thing in the center, whatever it was, did not move. Yet its presence pressed against us like water around a drowning man. I could not look directly at it, for there was nothing to see. And still, my body insisted it was there, hunched and watching. Marcus was the first to break the silence. What happens now?" he whispered. Aaron's lips quivered as he answered. "We wait, until the last flame dies." The words hung heavy in the air. None of us dared ask what would happen then. The candles burned slowly, wax melting into milky pools that slid toward the chalk. Each drop sounded louder than it should, sharp against the soil, like the ticking of a clock. Claire lifted her camera once more, perhaps out of habit, but when she tried to focus, the lens whined and clicked uselessly. She lowered it, trembling, as though ashamed. "I can't. It won't capture anything," she murmured. "It's like we don't exist." Her voice trembled at the edges, as though saying it made the thought more real. I looked at the others. Their faces glowed faintly orange, half shadows trembling with the candlelight. Marcus tried to look bold, but his hands gripped his knees too tightly, knuckles white. Claire sat frozen, the camera limp in her lap. Aaron was pale, whispering silent prayers in Thai. And me? I was staring at the last flame. One by one, the candles gave way. The wax drowned their wicks, the flames hissed, and shadows surged inward. Each time a flame died, the circle shrank, and the thing at the center seemed closer, though it had never moved. By the time 9 candles remained, Marcus began to laugh nervously. By 6, he had stopped laughing altogether. By 3, he refused to look at the center at all, keeping his gaze locked on the ground as though eye contact might invite disaster. Finally, only one candle burned. It stood directly in front of me, its flames small and trembling, a fragile island against the tide of blackness. My chest felt crushed, each breath a battle. The air smelled of burnt wax, smoke, and something else. Something metallic, like rust or dried blood. We waited. The flame danced violently, bending one way, then another, fighting against the invisible weight pressing down. My eyes watered, not from smoke, but from the unbearable tension of watching. I knew with every nerve in my body, that when it died, we would no longer be alone. And then, with a soft hiss, the flame vanished. Darkness swallowed the circle whole. At first, nothing. Only the sound of our breathing, shallow and ragged. The soil cold beneath my hands. Then a shift. Something scraped against the ground, soft, deliberate. The feeling of weight pressing down grew heavier. My heart thundered, and in the silence I heard it. Cloth moving, the faint rasp of skin against dirt. I looked up. There in the center of the circle sat a figure. It was no longer absence. It was shape. A shadow darker than the night around it, hunched, knees drawn close. Its arms were long, too long, the fingers thin as twigs resting against the soil. It had no face, only the void. Two hollows where eyes should be, blacker than any darkness I had ever known. It did not move, not at first. It only sat, as though waiting for us to acknowledge it. Marcus gasped, his voice cracking. Claire stifled a sob, pressing her hand over her mouth. Aaron bowed his head so low his forehead touched the dirt, whispering faster, desperately. I could not look away. The figure tilted its head slowly, like a curious animal. The sound it made was soft, barely a breath, but it filled the circle like thunder. A sigh, long and hollow, as though it exhaled the silence of centuries. I wanted to run. My body screamed to move, to flee, but my limbs had turned to stone. It spoke, not in words but in sound, a low murmur vibrating through the soil, into my bones. My teeth ached, my ears rang, but my mind understood. You called. The voice was not a voice. It was thought pressed into me, foreign and cold. My lips parted before I realized I was answering. We? My throat caught. We didn't mean. The shadow leaned forward, and every muscle in my body froze. You called. The air shivered. The chalk lines glowed faintly, then cracked, breaking like brittle bone. Aran cried out, reaching for my arm. Don't speak to it, he hissed. His eyes burned with terror. It listens. It remembers. But it was too late. The thing had fixed upon me. The silence that followed was suffocating. The others dared not move. The figure remained still, yet its hollow gaze held me captive, a weight I could not bear. Then it shifted. Slowly, with deliberate grace, it unfolded its limbs and sat upright. Its arms stretched outward, fingers brushing the air, tracing invisible lines. The remaining chalk markings flickered, as if alive, then crumbled into nothing. The circle was gone. For the first time, the darkness outside rushed in like water through a shattered dam. The trees, the graves, the night itself pressed closer, and the figure did not vanish with the circle. It stayed, as real as stone, sitting among us. Claire whimpered softly, clutching her camera like a child's toy. Marcus whispered something under his breath, maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. The figure turned its head toward each of them, then back to me, and I knew. It had chosen. We did not dare move, not until long after. The thing sat with us, silent, patient, as though part of the group. I could not say how long, minutes, hours, time dissolved. But when I blinked, when exhaustion finally dragged my eyes closed for a heartbeat, the figure was gone. Only the wax pools remained, hardened and pale, and the silence of the graveyard. We stumbled from the clearing at dawn, pale and hollow-eyed. Not one of us spoke of what we had seen. The book lay heavy in my bag, its leather warm against my back. I told myself it was over, that we had called, and it had answered, and it had left. But deep down, I knew better. Things like that do not come when called only to leave. They linger. They follow. The first sound was so faint I thought it was my own heartbeat. A low murmur, curling at the edges of the silence, slipping between the cracks of the night. We had seen the shadow, the faceless figure that sat in the circle after the last flame died. But seeing was easier than hearing. Hearing meant it had found a voice. I closed my eyes, hoping the sound would vanish, but it grew clearer. Words, though not in any tongue I knew, rippled through the air. They were wet, heavy, as though spoken with a mouth filled with soil. Claire whimpered, "Do you hear that?" Aaron nodded without lifting his head. Whispers, "Don't answer. Whatever you do, don't answer." But Marcus was trembling, his lips moving before he realized. "What's it saying?" he whispered, too loud, his words bleeding into the dark. The whisper stopped. All of us froze. Then, as if pleased, the voice returned, louder now, wrapping itself around Marcus like a rope. He pressed his hands to his ears, but his body shook as though the sound crawled directly into him. "Stop it!" he hissed, rocking forward. "It's inside my head." Aaron lunged toward him, gripping his shoulders. "Don't speak. Every word you give it is permission." But Marcus wasn't listening. His eyes rolled white, his breath stuttering, as though he were drowning. His mouth moved, but the sounds were not his own. They were deep, guttural, ancient, rising from somewhere beneath the ground. The figure shifted. For the first time since it appeared, it moved. Its long arm lifted, the twig-like fingers pointing toward Marcus. The hollow sockets where eyes should have been seemed to widen, like pits sinking deeper. I wanted to grab Marcus, to drag him out of the circle, but my body would not obey. The air around us was thick, as if each movement required more strength than I had left. Claire clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "It's taking him," she whispered, voice breaking. Marcus convulsed once, then stilled. His eyes rolled back down. Black, completely black, no white left. He turned toward us, smiling a smile that was not his. And when he spoke, it was in English. "You called. We came. Now, you are ours." The words slithered through the circle, each syllable cold and sharp, cutting the night. Aaron shouted, shoving Marcus back. "No, not him!" His voice cracked with desperation. "Take me instead!" But the figure only tilted its faceless head, as though amused. The whispers spread. They no longer came from Marcus alone, but from every shadow, every corner of the night. Low voices, countless, speaking at once, some in Thai, some in tongues I couldn't name, all weaving into a chorus that clawed at my sanity. Claire pressed her hands over her ears, screaming soundlessly. Tears streaked her face, her body curling inward. I held the book tighter against my chest. It vibrated faintly, humming like a living thing. My heart told me to throw it away, to cast it into the darkness. But something stronger rooted me. The book was not just an object, it was a doorway. To release it might be to release them entirely. The shadow in the center leaned closer, its body folding forward like liquid darkness. Its arm reached out again, fingers stretching, brushing just short of Marcus's shoulder. The wax on the ground hissed, melting though the flames were long gone. I forced my voice through the terror. "Why us?" I whispered, the words trembling, unwanted. The whispers answered in unison. "Because you asked." The sound pierced my skull, reverberating inside until I felt I might split apart. I wanted to scream, to deny it, but deep down I knew it was true. We had opened the circle. We had spoken the words. And in that silence, we had given permission. Marcus staggered forward, his body no longer his own. His arms stretched unnaturally wide, his movements jerky, puppet-like. His head tilted back, mouth open in a soundless laugh. A rune chanted louder now, his voice sharp, commanding, old prayers tumbling from his lips. The air shivered, fighting against him. But for a moment, just a moment, the whispers faltered. The figure hissed. It was not a human sound. It was the tearing of cloth, the snapping of roots, the scream of something that had never been alive. The ground quaked beneath us, dust rising in small clouds. Marcus collapsed to his knees, coughing, his eyes flickering between black and white. Sweat poured down his face. Aaron grabbed him, shaking hard. "Fight it! Don't let it stay!" But Marcus only sobbed, clutching his chest. "It's still inside," he gasped. I can't." The whispers quieted, settling into a low hum. The figure sat back again, calm, patient, as though it had all the time in the world. And maybe it did. We sat in that circle until dawn. None of us moved, too afraid to break what little barrier remained. When the first light touched the sky, the figure vanished, not slowly, not fading, but instantly, as if it had never been. But Marcus was not the same. His eyes were his again, but too dark, too sunken. He stared at nothing for long stretches, lips twitching, as though forming words he dared not speak. Claire refused to pick up her camera again. She walked with her head low, avoiding both shadows and mirrors. Aaron grew quieter than ever, his prayers constant, his eyes always scanning, waiting. And me, I carried the book still, though I knew I should have left it among the graves. Its weight grew heavier each day, as if feeding on what we had seen. That night in the hostel, I woke to a sound, a whisper. It came from the corner of the room, though no one was there. It came from the book, trembling faintly in my bag, and it came from Marcus, sleeping across from me, lips moving in the dark, repeating words I did not know, repeating them again and again. Morning came heavy and gray, the kind of light that should have carried relief but instead felt like a faded echo of the night before. We sat in silence at the wooden table of the hostel courtyard, bowls of rice untouched before us. None of us had much appetite. Marcus broke the quiet first. His laugh was too sudden, too sharp, cracking the stillness like glass. "Well, that was something," he said, rubbing his temples. "A real performance. Daniel, you got your story. Claire, you got your haunted pictures. Well, almost. And Aaron, you got to chant like your grandfather's ghost. What a night." His words grated against me. The memory of that shadow sitting with us was still carved into my bones. Mockery felt like blasphemy. Aaron's eyes flared. He set down his spoon with deliberate force. "You think it was a game?" Marcus smirked, though there was a tremor behind it. "What else?" We sat in a circle. We scared ourselves. The mind plays tricks in the dark. But I remembered the whispers, the way Marcus's voice had not been his own, his eyes black as empty wells. Tricks? No, that was no trick. Claire muttered, "Don't joke about it." Her voice cracked. The camera strap tangled nervously in her fingers. Yet Marcus pressed on, as though his laughter could shield him. "I mean, really, what's next? Ghosts following us home? Shadows whispering in our dreams?" The words were careless, tossed into the air like stones into deep water. And the water answered. That night it began. We had gone to bed early, each retreating to our rooms. I shared with Marcus again, though I dreaded the thought. He lay on his bed, humming tunelessly, while I turned toward the wall, pretending to sleep. Somewhere after midnight, the humming stopped. I woke to the sound of scratching, soft at first like a mouse gnawing wood, then sharper, deliberate. I turned my head slowly. Marcus was sitting upright, his back against the wall. His nails scraped again and again against the plaster, long white marks gouging into the surface. His face was expressionless, his eyes wide and unblinking. "Marcus," I whispered. He didn't answer. The scratching continued. His fingers bled, crimson streaks marking the wall. But he did not stop. Then in a voice too low to be his own, he murmured, "They said I was funny. They're laughing." My skin crawled. "Who's laughing?" He turned his head toward me. His eyes were black again. "Them." The whisper echoed in my skull, the same as in the circle. I scrambled upright, backing toward the door. "Aaron!" I shouted, my voice shaking. "Claire, come here!" Within moments, they burst in. Claire froze at the sight, her camera forgotten at her side. Aaron strode forward, grabbing Marcus by the shoulders. "Enough!" Aaron shouted. "You brought this on yourself! Stop mocking them!" Marcus only grinned, lips smeared with blood from biting them raw. "Why? They like it. They said I amuse them." His voice cracked into a giggle, high and jagged. Then his body convulsed. He fell sideways, limbs twisting violently, his head striking the floor with a sickening thud. Foam flecked his lips. His body writhed like a puppet with tangled strings. Claire screamed. I grabbed his arms, trying to hold him down, but his strength was inhuman. His back arched until I thought it would snap. His mouth opened wide, too wide, as though trying to expel something trapped within. And then, in that awful silence, came laughter. Not Marcus's. From the corners of the room, from beneath the bed, from the walls themselves. The sound of children laughing, high-pitched, echoing, overlapping. Dozens of voices, mocking, merciless. The air chilled instantly. Frost glazed the window, though outside was the humid night of Thailand. Our breath clouded the air. Marcus's body stilled. Slowly, unnaturally, he sat upright, his eyes hollow, black, endless, fixed on Arun. "You told us not to mock," he said, though the voice was layered, many voices speaking as one. "But mocking pleases us. It calls us. It keeps us near." Arun pressed his palms together, chanting prayers through gritted teeth. His voice was fierce, but his body shook. Marcus laughed again, blood trickling from his nose. "Prayers, always prayers. Do you think they burn us?" "No, Arun. They feed us. Every word makes us stronger." The laughter in the room swelled, filling every crack. My ears rang, tears burning my eyes. Claire collapsed against the door, sobbing. "Make it stop," she begged, but nothing stopped. Marcus slammed his head against the wall once, twice, 3 times, blood splattering in arcs. Yet he smiled through it all, the laughter never faltering. I could not move. My body was frozen, trapped between fear and disbelief. Finally, Aaron shouted one last prayer, pouring his entire being into the sound. The air quivered. The laughter cracked, splintering, as though the voices recoiled. Marcus collapsed, limp, bloodied. Silence fell. Only our ragged breathing remained. We thought it was over. We were wrong. Marcus stirred, groaning. His eyes fluttered open, clear again, though haunted. He blinked up at us, confused. "What? What happened?" he croaked. We exchanged no words. There was nothing to say, but deep inside I knew. The price of his mockery had been paid only in part, and the debt was still growing. That night, as I tried to sleep in another room, I heard it again. Whispers, faint at first, then clearer. Not from Marcus this time, not from the book, but from inside my own head. "You didn't stop him. You laughed too, in your heart. The price will come for you as well." I pressed the pillow over my ears, trembling. But silence no longer belonged to me. It belonged to them. I had thought the worst was behind us, that after Marcus's seizure, his laughter that was not his own, the night would retreat and let us breathe again. But the truth of such things is cruel. Once seen, they do not vanish. They follow, lurking at the edge of sight, waiting until silence grows deep enough for them to return. It began 3 nights later. We had moved to another guest house, hoping distance from the cemetery would untangle us from what we had summoned. Aaron insisted it was useless. "Spirits do not live in places," he said, voice low as he set incense at the windowsill. They live in debt. Wherever you carry that debt, they follow. I wanted to believe he was wrong. I wanted to believe the pale blue walls of this new place, the hum of scooters outside, the smell of fried garlic drifting from the street, could shield us. But denial is a fragile shelter. That night, Marcus woke us again. His scream was sharp, ripping through the thin walls like a blade. Claire and I ran into his room to find him standing before the mirror, his face inches from the glass. His fingernails scraped at his skin as though trying to peel it away. "What are you doing?" I shouted, grabbing his wrists. His eyes darted to me, wild, bloodshot. "They were looking at me," he gasped. "In the mirror. Hollow eyes. No lids, no white. Just pits. They don't blink. They never blink." Claire turned the mirror to face the wall, trembling. But I had seen it too, in the instant before. His reflection had not moved with him. The next day, Marcus refused to leave the room. He sat by the shuttered window, muttering, every so often lifting his head as though listening to a voice only he could hear. Claire tried to distract him, showing old photographs from her camera, but every image was blurred, corrupted, faces smeared, shadows bloated, the light twisted wrong. She threw the camera onto the bed, covering her mouth. "They don't want to be seen," she whispered. Arun grew harsher, his patience fraying. "You mocked them," he told Marcus. "You gave them an opening. Now they choose you. It is your burden." But when night fell, it became all of ours. I woke to silence, not the ordinary hush of sleep, but the thick, smothering kind that feels alive. The crickets outside had stopped. The scooters, the barking dogs, all gone. Then came the footsteps. Clop, clop, clop. Wooden sandals, deliberate, echoing down the hall toward our rooms. My body tensed, every muscle rigid. I turned slowly toward the door, and there, a shadow slid across the bottom gap, pausing as if it listened. Claire whimpered softly in her sleep, and the shadow moved on. I rose, bare feet cold against the floorboards, following the sound despite every instinct to hide. The steps led me to Marcus's room. The door was ajar. Inside, Marcus sat rigid on his bed, eyes fixed on the corner where darkness gathered thick as tar. Claire stood behind me, clutching my arm, while Arun stepped in with his incense still smoldering. And then we saw it. The figure was no longer vague shadow. It crouched low in the corner, its body long and gaunt, joints bending at angles too sharp. Its skin, or what looked like skin, was the color of ash, stretched thin over bones. But it was the face that froze me. There was none. Only two pits, hollow and endless, where eyes should have been. Blacker than any dark I had ever known, as though they were windows not into emptiness, but into somewhere else entirely. When its head turned toward us, the hollows locked onto mine, and I understood why Marcus had screamed. The sockets did not just look. They consumed. They pulled at me, tugging something invisible from behind my ribs. My breath caught, the air torn from my chest as though it fed the void inside its gaze. Claire sobbed, hiding her face in her hands. Arun shouted prayers, his voice breaking as incense smoke curled desperately in the air. The figure crept forward, bones cracking softly, limbs stretching like branches in the wind. Each step closer drew more air from the room until my lungs burned. Marcus whispered, "It wants me." His voice was thin, defeated. It said the eyes are hungry. But the figure didn't stop at him. It moved between us, tilting its hollow face toward each one in turn. The closer it came, the more I felt myself unravel. Memories slipping, thoughts dissolving into static. I stumbled back, clutching the book against my chest like a shield. At once, the figure froze, its hollow eyes fixed on the leather cover. The sockets widened, the blackness within deepening. The whispers swelled, louder than ever, crawling through my mind. "Ours, ours, return it!" My arms shook. Part of me wanted to throw the book to them, to end the torment. But another part knew. This book was all that kept us tethered to life. To give it up was to give ourselves. Aaron shouted over the whispers, his voice ragged. Do not surrender it. That is what they came for. That is the door. The figure hissed, the sound like wind through a grave. It lunged forward, its hollow gaze slamming into me. My knees buckled, my vision dimmed. And for a moment I saw graves upon graves, stretching into eternity. Countless hollow-eyed figures crouched in the shadows, whispering in unison. And in the center of it all, a flame, small, dying, waiting to be snuffed. I fell backward, gasping. Claire pulled me to my feet, tears streaking her face. Marcus screamed as the figure turned back to him, arms outstretched. And then, as suddenly as it had come, it vanished. The room exhaled. The air rushed back. The silence broke with the distant cry of a dog outside. Marcus collapsed, sobbing into his hands. It won't leave me. It wants me. The eyes, they never close. We said nothing. There was nothing left to say. That night, none of us slept. The hollow eyes had looked into each of us, and none of us would ever feel unseen again. Morning light has a cruel way of pretending everything is ordinary. The streets outside bustled with scooters, vendors called out for breakfast customers, and the air carried the sharp scent of chili and fried garlic. Yet inside our guest house room, the world was brittle, fragile, and silent. None of us spoke for hours. Marcus sat in the corner, his knees drawn up, mumbling beneath his breath. Claire stared at her camera, flipping through images that had all been reduced to smudges and black streaks. Aaron sat cross-legged on the floor, incense burning faintly beside him, his lips moving in constant prayer. And me, I read the book again. Its leather binding was warm against my palms, as though it breathed faintly. The pages writhed with meaning, just out of reach. The Thai script blurred, then sharpened. The drawing seemed to pulse. And tucked between the pages, I found something new. A thin scrap of parchment, folded small, brittle as old skin. When I unfolded it, English words scrawled across the surface. All who call must pay. Give blood or give breath. Give coin or give kin. The debt is chosen, but the debt is always taken. I read it aloud before I realized I had spoken. Claire's head snapped up, eyes wide. What does that mean? Arun's voice dropped low. It means what I feared. We broke the rule. We offered nothing. The ritual demanded payment. Now, it will take what it wants. Marcus laughed bitterly from the corner. So what? It'll take me? Good, let it end. But even he didn't believe his own words. His eyes twitched nervously toward the shadows at the edge of the room. I shook my head, the parchment trembling in my hand. Payment? We didn't know. Arun looked at me sharply. Ignorance does not absolve. To call is to bind yourself. The spirits are not like us. They don't forgive mistakes. They don't forget. That night, the debt began to collect. It started with Marcus again. He had fallen into a restless sleep, tossing and turning, his breath shallow. Claire and I sat awake, unwilling to close our eyes. Around midnight, Marcus jerked upright with a strangled cry. They're here, he gasped, clawing at his chest. Inside me. Aaron rushed to his side, pressing a hand to his forehead. His skin burned hot, his pulse rapid. But the true horror was his voice. Not one, but many spilling out at once. The debt. Pay it now. Claire covered her ears, sobbing. I gripped the book, desperate. What do they want? I shouted, as though the leather might answer. Marcus's body convulsed, his mouth opening wider than seemed possible. And then, in a soundless rasp, something like dust or ash spilled from his lips. Shapes curled in the ash, faces hollow-eyed, vanishing as they touched the ground. The whispers filled the room. Blood, breath, coin, kin. Choose. Aaron's eyes blazed with fear. It is demanding an offering. One of us must give something, Or it will take by force. Claire shook her head violently. No, no, this is insane. We can't. But her words died as Marcus shrieked, his body lifted from the bed, suspended in the air by nothing. His limbs flailed, his mouth still pouring ash. His eyes locked on mine, black pits that burned with silent agony. Daniel, he screamed, his voice his own for one fleeting moment. Make it stop. I clutched the book tighter, heart pounding. The parchment's words burned in my mind. Give blood or give breath. Give coin or give kin. Aaron pressed his palms together, voice low and urgent. If we do not offer, it will take kin, family, loved ones, wherever they are. This curse is not bound to this place. It will find them. The thought struck like a blade. My mother, thousands of miles away. My sister, all unaware, all defenseless. I whispered hoarsely, What do we give? Aaron's face was pale, his eyes dark with grief. Blood is the simplest, an offering of life, enough to appease, but it must be willing. Marcus crashed to the floor, sobbing, his skin pale as chalk. Do it, he croaked. Take mine, please. But when I moved toward him, Aaron shook his head. Not him. He has already claimed. The debt demands something fresh. Silence crushed us. Claire stared at me, her face hollow. It's not real, she whispered. It can't be real. But deep down, we knew. The debt was real. We didn't give anything that night. We couldn't. The thought of cutting ourselves, of offering blood to a shadow, it was too much. So the spirits took what they wanted. The next morning, Claire discovered her camera bag empty. Every photograph, every memory she had carried across the world. Gone. Even the digital cards were blank, wiped clean. She sank to the floor, clutching the useless device, wailing like something had been torn from her. They took it, she whispered through tears. They took everything. My work. My life. Aaron only nodded grimly. The first collection. They start small. They will not stop. I wanted to tell her it was just technology, that data could be corrupted. But I had seen the ash pour from Marcus's mouth, faces dissolving into nothing. This was no accident. That evening, I checked my bank account at the internet cafe down the street. The numbers stared back at me, impossibly wrong. Thousands of dollars gone. Every cent I had saved for this journey, drained. The whispers echoed faintly in my mind. Coin, coin. The debt was real. That night, none of us spoke. We sat in silence, each of us stripped of something. Marcus sat slumped, drained, barely conscious. Claire clutched her camera, empty as it was. I stared at the book, hating it, yet unable to let it go. And Arun, his face shadowed in the candlelight, said the words we already knew. It will not stop until it has taken enough, and enough is never what we think. I asked, voice breaking, Then how do we end it? He looked at me, eyes hollow. You don't end debt. You pay it, or it consumes you. His words sank into me like stone into water. I knew then we had not stumbled into a story. We had signed a contract, and the hollow-eyed figure was the collector. There are silences that heal and silences that rot. Ours was the second kind. By then, we no longer spoke unless we had to. Words felt dangerous, as though even a casual sentence might be overheard and twisted into permission. We stayed in the guest house for 2 more nights. By the third, it was clear the place itself had begun to sour. The incense Arun burned left no fragrance, only acrid smoke that clung to our lungs. The windows clouded over with condensation, no matter how wide they were left open. And at night we heard the steps, always the same, clop, 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 pacing the hall, pausing at our door. The debt was not waiting anymore. It was collecting. It took Marcus first. He had grown quieter, a terrible irony for the man who once laughed loudest. On the second night, he asked me to sit with him, his voice barely a whisper. I can't close my eyes, he murmured. They're waiting, behind the lids. Every time I blink, I see them staring. I tried to reassure him, though my voice carried no conviction. We'll find a way. We'll pay it somehow. Marcus laughed bitterly, a dry rasp. They don't want payment. They want us. That was the last thing he said to me. When dawn came, his bed was empty. No sign of struggle, no footprints, not even the dent where his body had lain. Only his phone remained, screen glowing faintly. On it, a recording, static at first, then whispers rising like a tide. One. The word repeated again and again until the battery died. Claire unraveled next. Her loss had begun with her photographs, but it cut deeper each day. She grew frantic, desperate to capture something real again. She roamed the streets by day with her camera, snapping endlessly. Vendors, children, monks in saffron robes. But every image came back blank, blurred, hollow. One afternoon, she burst into the room, eyes wild, shoving the camera into my hands. "Look," she shouted. "This time I saw them." I scrolled through the display, black frames, distorted light, and then one image. At first it looked like an ordinary street, the back of a fruit vendor's stall, but in the corner stood a figure, gaunt, hunched, faceless, hollow eyes staring directly at the lens. My stomach dropped. Claire laughed, high and ragged. "See? Proof. I caught them. They can't hide from me." But that night her laughter turned to screams. I woke to find her clawing at her eyes, shrieking that they were inside the camera now. Arun and I tried to hold her, but she thrashed violently, her strength shocking. And then, the camera flashed on its own, a blinding burst of light, though no one had pressed the shutter. When my vision cleared, Claire was gone. The camera lay on the floor, cracked. Its screen showed one last photograph. The three of us who remained, huddled in that dim room. And behind us, dozens of hollow-eyed figures, crowding closer. Two gone. Aaron and I stayed together after that, too afraid to separate. He grew thinner, his eyes hollow, his prayers more urgent. I carried the book always, though its weight felt unbearable. We walked the city like shadows ourselves, drifting through markets and alleys, never speaking of what had happened. People stared at us sometimes as though sensing the wrongness clinging to our skin. Children turned away, dogs barked, and at night the steps followed. Always the steps. On the fourth night after Claire, it came for Arun. We had taken refuge in a small monastery on the edge of town. The monks there welcomed us with cautious kindness, offering mats to sleep on and bowls of rice. Aaron believed their prayers would shield us, if only for a while. For a time, it seemed to work. The air felt lighter, the silence gentler. I began to think perhaps we had found sanctuary, but nothing halts a debt. I woke deep in the night to chanting. At first I thought it was the monks, but the voices were wrong, low, layered, endless. They seeped through the walls, coiling around me. I turned to wake Arun. His mat was empty. I found him in the temple hall, kneeling before the altar, incense burning at his sides. His body shook violently as though caught in a storm. The shadows around him writhed, twisting across the floor. "Arun!" I shouted, rushing forward. He turned, his eyes black, his lips cracked. "They said, if I gave myself, they would spare you." "No!" My voice broke. "Don't listen. They don't spare anyone." But he only smiled faintly. "Better me than you." The whispers surged, filling the hall. The incense flared, smoke rising in thick coils. Aaron convulsed once, twice, then stilled. His body crumpled, his chest no longer rising. The monks rushed in at my cries, but when they touched him, they stepped back in horror. His body was empty, lighter than it should have been, as though something vital had been scooped out. I knew then, the debt had taken him. 2. The whisper followed me out of the temple, riding the wind. And then there was 1. Me. I wandered through the city the next day like a ghost among the living. I avoided mirrors, avoided shadows, avoided sleep. But everywhere I turned, I saw them. Reflections in windows, hollow-eyed faces among the crowd, watching, waiting. The book throbbed against my chest, hot, alive. It whispered constantly now, a chorus of voices promising relief if only I surrendered. But I couldn't, because I knew the truth. Surrender was not payment. Surrender was annihilation. The debt would not stop with them. It would not stop with me. And as I write these words now, I can hear it behind me. The footsteps, closer, always closer. The city had begun to feel like a labyrinth built from shadows. Streets I had walked a dozen times no longer made sense. Corners twisted, alleys seemed to lead back upon themselves. And all the while I heard them, those measured footsteps, sometimes behind me, sometimes ahead, never close enough to see, but always close enough to know. I had lost Marcus. I had lost Claire. I had lost Aaron. One by one, the circle had thinned until it was only me. And still the debt was not satisfied. Desperation has a way of forcing you to places you would never go otherwise. That night I found myself wandering toward the edge of the city, where the lights grew faint and the river's black surface stretched wide. It was there that I saw it, a small temple, its wooden gates leaning under the weight of time, the lanterns at its entrance flickering weakly against the dark. Something inside me knew I was expected. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. Beyond lay a courtyard of worn stone, the air thick with incense smoke. Prayer flags hung tattered between the trees, whispering faintly in the wind. At the far end sat a figure, an old monk, thin as a shadow, his robe draped loosely over bony shoulders. He did not move as I approached, nor did he seem surprised. When I finally stood before him, breathless, shaking, he lifted his eyes. They were clouded with age, yet sharp enough to pierce straight through me. "You carry it," he said softly. His voice was like gravel, slow and deliberate. "The book, the debt." I swallowed hard, pulling the leather-bound thing from my bag. "Please," I whispered, "tell me how to end it." He did not reach for the book. Instead, he gazed at it with quiet sorrow. "You should not have opened it, but once open, it never closes." "I didn't know," I said, voice breaking. "We didn't know the rules. We didn't even believe." "Belief is irrelevant," he interrupted gently. "The fire burns whether or not you believe it will. The ritual binds whether or not you think it true. Such is the nature of debt." I sank to my knees, clutching the book to my chest. "They've already taken the others. Marcus, Claire, Aaron. I don't want to be next." The monk regarded me for a long moment, then asked, "Did you give them what was owed?" I shook my head. "We didn't offer anything. We didn't know." "Then the debt grows," he said simply. "It does not vanish when ignored. It compounds. Do you understand?" My throat closed. "Then what do I do?" He leaned forward slightly, his frail hands resting on his knees. "There are two paths," he said. "One is to pay, to offer freely before they take by force. The other is to run until there is nowhere left to run, and still they will find you." I trembled. "Pay? With what?" The monk's gaze darkened. "The parchment told you. Blood, breath, coin, kin. It is not my place to tell you which. But know this, whatever you give, it must be willing. The debt collectors know the difference between gift and theft." I thought of Marcus's laughter, Claire's camera, Aaron's sacrifice. None of them had been willing. They had been taken. And I had offered nothing. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why us? There are millions of people. Why choose us?" The monk lowered his eyes. "Because you asked. The dead do not come unless called. And you called." Silence fell heavy between us. The incense smoke thickened, twisting into shapes I almost recognized. Faces, hollow-eyed, watching me. Finally I asked, "Is there no way to undo it? To send them back?" The monk closed his eyes. "Once the door is open, it cannot be shut. You cannot return the fire to the match. You can only quench it with sacrifice." His words sank into me like stone into water. For a long moment I could not breathe. Then I whispered, "If I give nothing?" He opened his eyes again, meeting mine with sorrow. "Then they will take everything." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the book at his feet and walk away, pretend none of this had happened. But I couldn't. The book clung to me like a second skin, its warmth pulsing in time with my heart. The monk seemed to read my thoughts. "It will not let you go. The book is not yours. It is theirs. You are only the carrier. And when it has fed enough, it will return to the shadows, waiting for the next fool to open it." I shook my head violently. "No, I won't let that happen. I'll burn it." The monk's eyes narrowed. "Fire cannot touch it. Water cannot drown it. It is made of what lingers when all else has rotted away. You cannot destroy it." "Then what?" I cried. "What am I supposed to do?" For the first time, his expression softened, almost pitying. "You already know. You have known since the circle was drawn." My hands trembled around the book. Blood, breath, coin, kin. It was never about money, never about trinkets. It was about life. The monk rose slowly, his frail body straight yet unyielding. He walked past me toward the temple gate, pausing only once to say, "The debt does not vanish. It only passes on. Decide wisely whose debt it will be." And then he was gone, swallowed by the shadows of the courtyard. I was alone again. That night I sat by the river with the book on my lap, the parchment unfolded before me. The water moved sluggishly, reflecting the faint glow of the city. Every ripple seemed to carry whispers. "Give, give, give." The debt had followed me this far. It would follow me farther still. I stared at my reflection in the water, pale and hollow-eyed. For the first time, I wondered if I already belonged to them. I left the temple just before dawn. The monk's words still clung to me, heavy as chains. The debt does not vanish. It only passes on. I walked along the river until the sky bruised purple, until the vendors began setting out their carts of steaming rice and fried bananas. To them, the day was new. To me, it was only the echo of a night that refused to end. I told myself I was free, but freedom is a fragile illusion. Back at the guest house, I tried to rest. My body collapsed into the thin mattress. My arms curled around the book as if clutching it might keep me alive. For hours, I drifted between waking and dreams. In the dream, I stood again in the cemetery. The circle of candles burned low. The final flame trembled, then died. And from the dark, the figure rose. Its hollow eyes turned toward me, wider, deeper, until I felt myself falling into them. I woke gasping, the sheet damp with sweat. But the dream had not ended, because from the corner of the room came the sound. Clop, clop, the footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossing the wooden floor. My throat locked. I turned my head inch by inch, and there it was. Not in shadow, not half seen, but standing in the corner, hunched, long arms dangling, its faceless head tilted as if listening. The hollow eyes burned black against the pale morning light. It had followed me. I tried not to move, not to breathe. The air around me was thick, pressing down until my ribs ached. The figure leaned forward. The boards creaked under its weight, though its body looked too thin to bear any. Its arms dragged against the floor, fingers scratching faint lines into the wood. Then it spoke, not aloud, but inside my head. "You carry us." My teeth rattled. "I didn't." My voice cracked. "I never meant." The hollow eyes widened. "Intent is nothing. Debt is everything." I scrambled back against the wall, the book clutched so tightly my knuckles blanched. "I don't want this. Take it. Take it back." The whispers hissed. "Once opened, never closed. You carry us until the last flame." The figure stepped closer. I pressed my back to the wall, shaking, every muscle screaming to flee. But when I blinked, it was gone. Only silence remained. And yet, I knew it hadn't left. For days after, I wandered the streets trying to outrun it. The city blurred. Markets, alleys, temples. Everywhere I went, I felt the gaze. In windows, I saw reflections that weren't mine. My face pale but hollow eyes staring back. In crowds, I caught glimpses of gaunt figures crouching just beyond the corner of sight. And always the footsteps. At first at night, then in the day too. Clop, clop, behind me in alleys. Across the ceiling at midnight. Even beneath the floorboards, like something crawling up through the foundation. People began to avoid me. Vendors turned away. Monks lowered their heads. One woman selling jasmine garlands whispered a word in Thai I did not know, crossing herself as though to ward me off. I was no longer a traveler. I was marked. On the fourth night after the temple, I returned to my room to find the book open on the bed. I had not left it that way. The pages turned themselves, rustling though no wind blew. They stopped at a drawing I had not seen before. A figure crouched over a man lying flat, its long fingers pressed against his chest. The man's eyes were hollow, his mouth open in a scream. Beneath the drawing, a line in English appeared, as though ink had bled up from the page itself. In the end, the carrier pays. The last flame is the carrier's breath. My heart stopped. It wasn't enough that Marcus, Claire, Aaron had been taken. It had always been coming to me. The book had chosen. That night I did not sleep. I sat with the lamp burning low, every shadow in the room shifting like something alive. At times I heard Claire's laugh, Marcus's mocking voice, Aaron's steady prayer, echoes of the dead, whispering from the dark. And then just before dawn, the lamp flickered and died. In the silence that followed, the steps began again, slow, deliberate, crossing the room toward me. I held the book like a shield, though I knew it was useless. The air grew colder, my breath misting. The figure emerged from the corner, bending low, its face inches from mine. The hollows gaped, endless, swallowing the faint light. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Its hand lifted, fingers long and sharp. They brushed my cheek, and in that instant, I felt my breath falter, tugged from me like thread pulled from fabric. My chest ached, lungs straining for air that no longer belonged to me. The debt, the voice whispered, is almost paid. I collapsed to the floor, gasping. The figure withdrew, stepping back into the shadows. And when the sun rose, I was alone again. But I knew now what awaited me. The final candle, my own breath. The nights no longer passed in hours. They stretched like wounds, endless, bleeding into one another until time itself lost meaning. I stopped counting days. I stopped eating much. All I knew was that I was waiting, though for what, I dared not name. The book never left me. Even when I tried, even when I hurled it into the river one desperate dawn, I found it on my bed by nightfall, its leather damp but intact, humming like a heart that refused to die. The whispers grew bolder, no longer faint, no longer hidden. They filled my skull when I walked the streets, when I sat alone, when I tried to close my eyes. Sometimes it was Marcus's laugh, mocking. Sometimes Claire's sharp cry, pleading. Sometimes Aaron's steady voice, reciting prayers that now rang hollow. But always beneath them all was the low chorus of the hollow-eyed, patient, certain. The last flame, the last breath. The debt must be paid. I returned to the temple once, desperate enough to beg the old monk again. But when I arrived, the gates were shut, the lanterns dark. The courtyard lay empty, abandoned, as though it had never existed. I understood then. He had never been a rescuer, only a keeper of truths I had not wanted to face. His role had ended once the message was delivered. There would be no salvation. The breaking point came on a night like all the others, heavy, humid, too quiet. I sat in my room with the book open, the candle on the table burning low. The flame bent and twisted, fighting against some unseen draft. And then with a long sigh, it flickered out. Darkness. The sound came immediately. Clop, clop. Steps across the floorboards, slow and steady, until they stopped beside me. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. The air had already collapsed, pressed thin by its presence. My lungs struggled to draw breath. The voice came, filling me from within. "It ends with you, carrier of the circle, keeper of the flame." I whispered hoarsely, "Why me?" The hollow eyes opened in my mind. "Because you stayed. Because you did not pay. Because every circle must close." I felt it then, the cold fingers brushing my chest, pressing lightly against my ribs. My breath hitched, and with each second, more of it was drawn away. I clawed at my throat, gasping, but there was no air to take. The shadows pulled it all, tugging at my life as though unraveling thread. Images crashed through my mind. Marcus's grin fading to terror, Claire's frantic eyes, Aaron kneeling at the altar. One by one they had fallen, and now it was my turn. The whispers swelled, a chorus of countless voices, rising into a dreadful chant. The last candle, the last breath. Paid, paid, paid. I collapsed to the floor, vision dimming, the world narrowing to the hollow gaze above me. My chest heaved once, twice, then stopped. For an instant I thought it was over, but death never came. Instead, silence. I opened my eyes. The room was the same. The candle still smoked faintly on the table, but the figure was gone. I sat up slowly, touching my chest. My heart still beat. My lungs still drew breath. But something inside me had shifted, emptied. The whispers were no longer outside. They were within. I looked to the book. Its pages turned themselves, fluttering until they stopped at a blank sheet. And on that blankness, letters began to appear. Black, curling, alive. "The circle must continue. You are now the flame." My hands trembled. I slammed the book shut, but the words still burned behind my eyes. The meaning was clear. The debt was not ended. It had only been passed on, just as the monk had said. I was no longer the victim. I was the vessel. I left the guest house at dawn, walking through the waking streets with the book hidden beneath my arm. The people around me glanced once, then away, their gazes skittering as though they sensed what I carried. The river shone dull silver, the morning sun breaking across its surface. I stopped at its edge, staring into the current, wondering if I should cast myself in, let the water swallow me whole. But the book pulsed against my ribs, warm, insistent, and the whispers came again, soft, coaxing. "Find the next circle. Find the next flame. The ritual must be fed." That night I sat alone in a cafe, notebook open before me. To anyone else, I might have looked like a writer, scribbling down ideas for a story. But the words that spilled from my pen were not mine. They were instructions. 12 candles, a circle of chalk, the chant, the warning. And when I finished, I slid the page between the folds of a battered book someone had left behind. Not the cursed book itself, it never left me, but a simple notebook that would one day fall into someone else's hands. Someone curious, someone foolish, someone like me. I tell myself I did it to survive, that passing the circle on buys me more time, that I'm not to blame if another chooses to light the candles. But at night, when the silence grows heavy and the footsteps pace outside my door, I know the truth. The debt is never settled. It only changes carriers. And one day soon, when my breath finally fails, the book will slip free, waiting for the next pair of hands. The last candle will never die. Thanks for watching the whole video. Please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to watch more interesting stories.